Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us this morning for the most recent version of the town hall. I'd like to give a big shout out to DRS and in particular to John Biello, Deputy Commissioner there, for joining us today. The DRS has been really great about working with the practitioners. We have that DRS liaison dinner every year, where people have an opportunity to speak with members of the DRS team, which is always helpful. And they're great about also giving us articles to include in the newsletter, et cetera, as well as showing up for meetings like this. So thank you very much, John, for joining us this morning.
Anytime, Bonnie. Thanks for having me.
What we asked for, and I've told John he can move in any direction he thinks is appropriate, but is to kind of give us what he thinks we should know in preparation for this tax season. So what are some hot topics that we should be aware of? If there's anything that we're falling a bit short on, let us know about that. But just an overall, and he's done some research of his own to identify additional questions that he thinks that we should be aware of too. So without further ado, John, please kick it off.
Sure. Thanks, Bonnie. Good morning, everybody, and happy to be here. And I believe I also have Phil Soucy on with me as well. I'm not sure if he's joined us yet, but Phil Soucy is our bureau chief of our operations division here at the agency. And for those of you that don't know, the operations division are the ones primarily responsible for getting all your returns processed, processing payments, things like that. So Phil, and also Phil's other role at the department has been the project manager on the implementation of our new tax processing system, which you all know as MyConnect. So if there's any MyConnect questions, Phil would certainly be the person to answer those. So hopefully Phil's on. I don't see him, but he is.
Can you hear me?
Oh, there he is. There he is. All right, great. Thanks, Phil. So we are in filing season, as all of you know, and from our perspective here at DRS, things have gone so far relatively smooth. We had a really smooth launch to the tax season.
In the 6th grade for about 5.
I'm not sure what, can you hear me? I'm not sure what happened there. I got muted.
Okay. Now we can.
Okay, great. So as I was saying, we had a really smooth start to the tax season. We usually start every year a couple of days to a week in advance of the IRS, just to kind of get our systems up and running, work out any bugs that there might be. And this year, I have to say, for being relatively new in our new system, things have gone extremely smooth. Our electronic filing rates are higher than they've ever been so far. Phil and I keep a real close eye on that. And the amount of paper that the agency is receiving is extremely low right now, which we're happy. We're pleased. It benefits the state in that, we don't have the cost and effort to process paper, and it helps the taxpayer in that the returns are being processed quicker, refunds are being processed much quicker. So we're pleased to see that. And if there's any effort that any of you are playing in that, we appreciate that. We appreciate the word getting out that electronic filing is the way. That's the preferred method. So Phil, is there anything you wanted to provide in terms of the filing season, how things are going, any stats that you may have or anything like that?
I think kind of to echo what you said, John, the volume of electronic filing, usually early on in filing season, it's high anyways, because you get a lot of software. And over the years, we've seen the paper rates go from 10% of the filing down to about 5% now. So we're seeing close to 95, 96% of everything electronic. And as preparers know, the majority of the electronic filing we receive, especially for income tax, is through software, whether it's through a certain software product or the modernized e-file. But we're close to 95% of electronic filing of income taxes through different softwares. Another thing to keep in mind is late last year, the IRS kind of released some of the guidelines or the restrictions they had for free file. So we weren't able to take advantage of that last year One of the things, we weren't allowed to use free file because we have our own portal that allows people to file electronically for personal income tax purposes. And the IRS dropped that restriction. So our goal is to try to get, by the end of this year for next filing season, a free file option for taxpayers as well. So with that, that should continue to increase the electronic filing for personal income taxes. But again, the second year in the new system, accepting income tax returns, and went smoothly last year, and we're seeing the same this year.
Thanks, Phil. And just a little bit more on the administrative front from us. Some of the things that you might see from us down the road is we've just hired 20 consumer information reps that will be manning our call center, our contact center. So we've always prided ourselves that the wait times haven't been extremely long when you compare us to other agencies and especially the IRS. But we still want to drive those wait times down even further. So we've been able to supplement our staff with 20 additional consumer info reps that will be starting. I believe they start tomorrow. In fact, so we will have them on the phone and manning the phones, and hopefully cutting down some of our wait times for anyone trying to get through to us. We're also, and I mentioned this to Bonnie last week, we are also restructuring our taxpayer advocate function here at the agency. We are going to be operating in what I consider a much broader service, and we're calling it constituent services. Ernie Adamo, who's been a longtime employee at the agency, he's actually our legislative liaison as well. So when we say constituent services, it's the public, it's tax practitioners, and it's legislators as well. We'll all funnel through Ernie's office as a way to triage and handle any questions that might be coming in. So you'll see that from us soon. And although I can't promise anything in the near future, we do have plans for a practitioner helpline. I spoke to Bonnie about that last week, and we've been a little reluctant to roll something like that out, given the staffing shortages that we've experienced over the last couple of years. And the last thing we wanted to do was roll something out that we couldn't deliver on effectively. We're getting to a point where we can start delivering those types of services. So along with Ernie's new responsibilities and constituent services, will be more attention and more focus paid to the practitioners and assistance that we can provide to practitioners as well. So that's something to look forward to down the road, hopefully shortly. So Bonnie, I don't know if I can take some questions if there's any. I'm happy to do that.
Bonnie, you're muted.
Apologize. That would be great. Thanks, John. We do have a few questions from members. One says that my client's been receiving correspondence from the DRS of an unclaimed tax refund. Can you comment on that? Do you send emails to people saying telling them that they've got unclaimed tax refunds?
Yeah, whenever I hear something like that, Bonnie, I always get cautious. In the day and age that we live in, with the scams that are going on out there, my first question to someone, whenever someone comes to us with a question like that, I throw it right back to them. I say, I need to see what was sent to you, because that'll give us a clear indication of whether it's authentic or not. Typically, we will not send an email like that to someone. What we would always do is send a letter. If there was some type of an issue with the taxpayer's account, we do send a sheet letters when there's a credit that's sitting with the agency for a certain period of time, and before we sheet that over to the treasurer's office and it becomes part of the unclaimed property list, we send a letter. So it would be in the form of a letter to the taxpayer that says, look, the agency has this credit for you. We will be sheeting it shortly. If you need more information, contact us. But it would never be in the form of an email. So that kind of raises some red flags, the way the question was worded there.
What could
Okay.
happen too is if now that we have our new portal, if taxpayers have a profile there and we mail a letter to them, they may get an email indicating there's a new letter that they can log into the MyConnect portal and see the letter. And it could be exactly what John's saying, the sheet letters. We mailed out a large volume of them in December. And I believe there's 91 days. So by March, they have to log in and claim it before we release it to the treasurer's office. The volume could
But
have
again,
been
it's snail mail.
Yes, yep. That would explain it. If it went out in December and they got it either late December, early January, it would have been our sheet letters. And the volume might have been higher now with the last rollout of our taxes into the new system, because the business entity taxes came over. And if they are businesses, it could have been credits they had through the business entity tax.
Okay, thank you. Just to follow up on that, there is a question regarding unclaimed property here as well. It says that and you may not be able to answer that because it's a completely different agency, but it says the unclaimed property division seems to indicate that unclaimed property must be turned over usually within 3 to 5 years. Do you know by any chance if they're sending out anything via email, or do you believe that's the same process, or for us to check with the treasurer's office?
Yeah, I'm not quite sure, Phil. Do you have anything on that? I don't know.
Unless they have guidelines to that restrict it, we will release it to the treasurer's office after 90 days of when we send a letter for achievement. And then they may have other rules on how long after it's released to them that the money can be claimed.
Got
if they
it.
got the letter from us and the credit's available and they haven't claimed it, then they could probably go to the treasurer's office in a few months and the credit should be available there.
Right.
Great, thank you. We've got 2 more that just popped up, and I'll go back and forth between the ones that people are putting in the chat session and those that were emailed to us. But the next one is, will the DRS allow amended business returns soon?
A lot of that depends on the software company. So I'll tell you what our experience was with amended individual income tax returns. This was a question that we got regularly. And the answer was, again, it depends on whether or not the software vendors are going to participate in that. We always make the returns available. It's whether or not the software vendors pick them up. Is that correct, Phil?
Well, recently, I think it was 2 years ago, we started to accept the 1040 amendeds because the IRS had what they call schemas to accept amended returns through modernized e-file, and we accept them as well. We currently don't accept the amended returns through modernized e-file or through software or the business taxes, but through our portal, any return can be amended if they create a profile.
Through MyConnect.
Yeah, through MyConnect.
Thank you. Another question that's been posted in the chat is, for 2024, the pass-through entity tax is going to be elective. How and when is the election made?
So good question. And I was going to spend some time on the pass-through entity tax. So as everybody knows, legislation in the past legislative session made some significant changes to the pass-through entity tax effective for tax years starting on or after 1/1/24. One of the things that it did was make the tax an elective tax. So Phil and I are actually wrestling with that right now, and we're looking at the return. We're trying to come up with the most efficient way to handle this. And we've looked at just about every state that has a pass-through entity tax to see how the other states are handling it. Some have one return where the pass-through entity tax and the composite income tax are handled on the same return. Other states have 2 returns. There are actually, I believe, 2 states that actually have 3 returns. Massachusetts being one of them, where there's a pass-through return, a pass-through entity tax return, and then there's the composite income tax return. So, as a matter of fact, Phil and I have a meeting with Massachusetts this afternoon to talk to them and see how they program their system to handle it. Massachusetts uses a system that's similar to ours, So, and they've already done this. So if we can learn anything from them, we certainly will do so. So that's kind of the landscape of where we're at with pass-through entity itself. We're still in development of the return, still in development of the instructions and some guidance. To answer the question specifically, when is the election going to be made? Although it hasn't been definitive yet, I'm leaning toward it will be made on the return itself. So there'll be a checkbox on the return where the election could be made. Again, not set in stone, but that's kind of what we're looking at right now. So I hope that answers. And I see the next question came in. I hope they don't follow New York. We haven't reached out to New York, so we try not to do that whenever we can.
We have another one that was mailed to us. We actually had several pass-through entity questions, so I think that's great that you answered those questions because those are hot. Another one here is, are the 2023 pandemic pay for essential workers payments, sorry, let me start that over, I apologize. Are 2023 pandemic pay for essential workers payments excludable from state of Connecticut income tax?
The short answer is yes. And I realize that let's just step back a little bit. There was an issue that just came up with the comptroller's office regarding this pay. So it'd probably be a good time to address that. Comptroller's office sent out 1099 NEC forms for recipients of the essential worker pay. There's some question about whether that was the correct form or not. The comptroller's office, from my understanding, is going to be mailing a letter to all the recipients of the essential worker pay to clarify. And that letter apparently is something that could be used in the event that the IRS questions whether or not there should be self-employment tax paid on those payments. So that's just kind of a little aside as to what's been happening with those types of payments in terms of administrative issues with the state. In terms of the taxability, it is subject to tax federally. However, the General Assembly provided some relief to taxpayers for this type of pay. So it is not subject to Connecticut's income tax. There is a subtraction modification on the Connecticut 1040 to remove those payments.
Thank you. We have another one here regarding the PTE, and that is, what is the advantage of opting out of PTE?
Yeah, that's a tough question to answer because it really depends on the facts and circumstances of the individual taxpayer. I think this probably creates some headaches for practitioners in that they're going to have to evaluate the taxpayer situation and determine whether or not there is a benefit that can be had by paying the pass-through entity tax. So it's a tough question for me to answer. It really has to do with the facts and circumstances of the individual taxpayers. The tax base has changed a bit. So there are some technical changes to the law that will be in effect for 2024. So those are all things that need to be considered. I know that's a high level answer, but that's really the best I can do with that. It really depends on facts and circumstances.
That's fair. Another question that's been posted is, other states' municipal bond premium. We've had this discussion lately too, John. Other states' municipal bond premium add back seems to be very unfair, as there is no Connecticut law to take this state deduction like New York with itemized deductions. Is there a policy decision to see if the current policy is unconstitutional?
Well, there's a lot there.
There is.
First, it is. I'll address the policy part. It's not policy; it's statute. It's law. So the current way that the bond premium issue is being handled is based in state law. So it's not a policy that the agency has put in place or anyone else. It's the law. So when your clients receive a notice from the agency with this being the issue, the audit division is simply acting on the law as it is written. In terms of conversation yesterday, not with respect to bond premiums, but with respect to another issue. The only thing that every state agency can do is presume that the law as written is constitutional. We're charged with enforcing the law as it's written and as it is enacted by the General Assembly. So there's a much higher being above the agency that would have to decide whether or not that's actually constitutional or not. But with all that said, we are very aware of the issue. Bonnie and I have had conversations about it. We've talked with other members of the society, and we are aware. We understand what the issue is, and again, it's simply a legislative change that would be required to get the results that are desired.
And just FYI, after speaking with the Department of Revenue Services, myself and our current chair and next year's chair of the state tax group met with the finance committee chair, one of them yesterday, and discussed this and whether or not we could have the non-Connecticut bonds treated the same way as the Connecticut bonds. So we have raised that with legislators. There are some financial implications if they make a change. So we're not sure whether that will move forward this year or not, but at least we're getting that topic out there and discussing it with legislators. So hopefully we can make a change in the future. All right. We have another question here. Why did the legislature change the pass-through entity to be elective?
Before I answer that, Bonnie, Phil, did you have your hand? Did you want to comment on?
Bonnie, I just wanted to jump back while it was still in the chat. Reading Kathy Campbell's question about allowing amended returns soon. If it's related to business amended returns and it's related to filing through software, we do allow it. It's just a checkbox on the return, but the software has to be signed up to accept amended returns. It's the same form. You just have a checkbox on it for amended, because there isn't a separate form for amended filings for the business taxes. So they would elect it when they file. And if it's not on the software, they could check with their software company if they accept amended filings. Okay, sorry, John.
No, thanks, Phil. Thanks for clarifying that. So Bonnie, to go back to the pass-through entity tax, why the General Assembly made it elective. I can only speculate, and just a little bit on the history side. Connecticut was the first state to enact the pass-through entity tax, and we were the only state to mandate it. So it was mandatory for the first several years that it's been in place, and we were the only state to make it mandatory. So I believe that had something to do with it, but also the governor had a comprehensive package that made some additional changes. Governor Lamont proposed several changes with the pass-through entity tax. That he proposed increasing or restoring the credit for the pass-through entity tax that the individual would claim on the return to 93.01%. That would have made the pass-through entity tax completely, it would have been a wash. It would have been paid, the tax would have been paid at the entity level, and then the individual would have gotten full credit for the tax that was paid at the entity level. So that was the big item that the governor wanted. He also wanted to make it elective, and again, to provide practitioners and the members of pass-through entities the flexibility to determine whether or not it was beneficial to pay the tax and to receive the benefits of paying the tax at the entity level. Unfortunately, when it went to the General Assembly, when the proposal went to the General Assembly, the only thing that came out of it, well, not the only thing, but the major thing that came out of it was making the tax elective. The restoring the credit didn't survive through the legislature. So the governor got some things that he wanted, but he didn't get, all of them. So that's the only explanation that I can give as to why the General Assembly did that.
It's always hard to guess what they're up to or why.
Yes, yes.
Another question that's been asked is, some people in the state, I believe it's also New London County, have had their deadlines extended. Does that apply to all the taxes, for example, the trusts and estates that are normally filed on April 15th? Or does that just apply, that extension for New London County residents, does that just apply to the personal income tax?
That's a great question. I'm glad that was brought up. And the department recently issued some guidance on that. There's a taxpayer services bulletin that's on our website, and I don't have it in front of me, unfortunately, but there's actually a chart that lists all of the tax types that are extended. And I believe trusts and estates is one of them that is on the list. Personal income tax, obviously, corporation business tax returns, pastoral entity returns that may be due between, I think it was from January 1st to April 15th. If there was any returns due within that period of time, some of the estimates, I believe, are also on that list. So it essentially mirrors what the IRS extended.
Got it. All right, thank you. I'm sorry, trying to keep track of all the questions, and I can't remember whether this one was answered. Has there been any guidance issued for opting into or out of the pass-through entity tax?
We're still in the middle of developing that guidance, so we will have something out hopefully soon. And again, if I were to bet on this, I would say it's going to be an election on the return where you check a box on the return and elect in. I don't think there's going to. We're trying to make this as easy and as efficient as possible. Having another return filed to make I know there are states that have a separate form that's filed to make the election. I don't know. I just don't see us going in that direction. It just seems to me to add more burden to the taxpayer, and we're trying to avoid that. We're trying to make it as easy as possible.
Got it. Thank you. All right, we've got a lengthy one here. Regarding Connecticut's 1040X amended return changing from MFJ to MFS. I'm sorry, don't know what that is, so I'm just giving you the acronym.
Yep.
And applying the original joint refund allocation to each spouse. How to tell Connecticut DRS how to allocate the joint refund. I'm not sure quite what that means.
Okay, I think I got it. So they're amending their return to change their filing status, and they want to know how to tell the department how, because it's now a married filing separate return. So we now have two returns. They want to know how to allocate the refund that's due to each spouse. Is that, Phil?
I believe you're right, because it goes on to say the allocation was 50% on the return, but the DRS allocated 100% to one spouse. And that's caused penalties and interest on one return and overpayment on the other. So yes, I believe you've got it.
Okay. Phil, what's your thoughts? There's probably several different ways we can handle this.
I think we'd have to look at them on a case-by-case basis.
Yes,
So
yes.
if that did happen, and depends on what software they use, they probably should contact our agency to look into exactly what happened. Because again, it's all facts and circumstances here, depending on how they did it. If it was originally a refund situation and then amending it to another refund situation or so forth and so on, we have to look at those.
There's somebody else that just put in that they've had the same issue on an original turn, and that estimates were made. I remember now what MFJ is. I married filing jointly, but ended up filing married filing separately. So a few people have that issue. Is there anything in particular, other than telling them it's going to be handled on a case-by-case basis, that the practitioners should be aware of, that you think that we should be aware of to try to make this a little bit easier, or there's nothing at this point?
I don't have anything at this point. We could look into it and let you know. Again, well, if we look at a couple situations and we see that there's some guidance we can put out, we can do it based on that if there's similar issues.
Yeah.
Okay,
I would also add, Bonnie, that if it's on a case-by-case basis, just reach out to us either through, a web message through MyConnect or through email, the DRS email, with all of the information on the account. this way we can start working the account specifically. If we have all of the account information and the details, it's really just a matter of sending a brief letter or, you know, brief email explaining the situation, and then we can get started working the account itself.
Okay. The next question is, the Connecticut DRS, how do you allocate on the amended return rather than calling in? So is there a way to allocate it on the amended return, or do people have to call into you?
Well, I think based on if this is related to the scenario that we just described, it would be much easier to talk with somebody and to handle that specific case, like Phil said, on a case-by-case basis. To me, that's always the safest way and always the way to get something done correctly the first time through, rather than, you know, trying to explain it on the return itself and then sending it to us. I just see a lot of back and forth occurring when that happens.
Got it.
Yeah, it could be, especially when you're going from joint to filing separately, and there's estimates involved, because really the joint, when it's filed and the estimates are made, the estimates are made under the joint account, usually listed as the primary. And then if one's filed before the other, the overpayments may be allocated more quickly if the second married filing separate return hasn't been received.
Okay. So someone here is saying, please issue guidance soon, but it sounds like in order to issue guidance, it would really be helpful to hear about a couple of these cases, so you've had a better idea of what guidance does need to be issued. So
yeah, that's a good point, Bonnie. If there's specific specific cases that we can look at, and then we can certainly look at issuing guidance based on the facts of those cases if they're similar.
So if somebody has a couple of cases that they'd be willing to share with you, so you've got an understanding of the challenges that they're encountering, who should they send those to? Should they put that in through My Connect too, or how do we best get that information to you?
Well, why don't you send it to me and Phil, me or Phil, and this way, you know, reference this conversation, reference the town hall meeting, and this way we know what it's referring to.
Perfect.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. The pass-through entity tax is a costly nuisance for many CPAs. More paperwork for which clients have little appreciation, plus educating very small business clients with regard to the operations of the tax. Many still don't understand after years now. Hopefully the legislature will not enact additional rules causing us to spend valuable time. This is more of somebody expressing frustration with the tax, which I've heard from a number of our practitioners over the years. I will tell you that the legislature is looking at the pass-through entity tax again, because it is being, it's a priority of the Connecticut Business and Industry Association, CBIA, and they are still looking for the full credit to be restored. But I don't believe that they're looking at least I'm not aware of anything else they're looking to do. Are you, John or Phil?
No, and actually I can say that these comments, the comments from Bill, are exactly why the General Assembly made it elective. You know, if a taxpayer is in a situation where they can reap some significant benefits from paying the tax at the entity level, they can certainly avail themselves of that. But if they're a small business that's you know, going to receive little to no benefit, then the mandatory nature of the tax would have still required the return to be completed. And like Bill is saying in the comments, you know, that a lot of paperwork and unnecessarily in fact as well. So I think this is exactly why the General Assembly changed it from a mandatory filing to an elective filing. So the comments are, I appreciate the comments, and we completely understand them. And I think that's exactly why the General Assembly did what they did.
One of the things that the agency has done recently, and you mentioned this a little bit earlier, is try to expand that taxpayer services group. And
Yep.
you've started issuing I think it's called tax notes. Is it called tax notes? Tax topics, something along those lines. Would you let everyone know about that? I think that's a great service.
Yes, absolutely. Happy to. I love talking about taxpayer services because that's where I started here 33 years ago. So it's kind of near and dear to me. For a while there, the agency, I think this is my own personal feeling, we neglected our taxpayer service area. It really dwindled down to a shell of what it used to be. And over the years, it's kind of been my goal is to rebuild. And I have the support of Phil. Phil's on our senior management team, as well as Lou Bucari. He's our general counsel. And we've had the full support of all of our senior managers to get back to where we were in the late 90s and early 2000s with our taxpayer services function. We have, and actually, one of the, from our perspective, one of the not bright spots, that's not the right way to put it, but one of the good things, I guess, that came out of the pandemic is the change that we've made with remote work and virtual capabilities. So now with video conferencing, for example, we're able to help so many more taxpayers than we were before. We have staff in our taxpayer service area that has virtual conferences with taxpayers all day long. They're assisting taxpayers virtually. So it's convenient in that the taxpayer doesn't have to come into our office, doesn't have to bring documents with them. They can do it from the convenience of their home and get the matter resolved very, very quickly. So there's been some real advances there in how we're assisting taxpayers. I mentioned earlier that we've got 20 new consumer information reps that are starting tomorrow that will be manning our phones. We've also created an education and outreach section in our taxpayer service area. They've been producing short videos that are intended to provide guidance to taxpayers on some basic things, filing, making payments, how to do certain things with the agency. So there's a whole library that's being established and growing on our website of those short videos. And we've also, one of the things that I've loved to see over the last year and a half is our webinar series. We are producing webinars. The last one we did was for the trucking industry on the highway use fee. We had over 1,000 people participate on. It was a live webinar similar to this, and we had over 1,000 participants in that. We also did a general income tax one for the kind of kick off the income tax season, and we're doing another one in early March, I believe, early to mid-March. And the one we did just recently, again, there was over 1,000 people on that. So these are well received, and what it tells me is that there's a need for this, and we're going to continue to do more and more. We're going to expand into our sales tax area to provide guidance to retailers. We've done one on withholding tax, which again was well received. I think we had 400 or 500 employers on that call or on that webinar as well. So those are some things that that we're doing. We've had some very early success, and we plan more of these. So our taxpayer services has really grown quite a bit over the last couple of years.
I think that's great. We really appreciate your paying attention to that unit. I think that's something that many of our practitioners would agree with you on, that it provided very helpful being able to contact more people. I know that many of us call you all the time, but one person can only answer so many calls a day. So I think that was a great move for several reasons.
Yeah.
All right. We have a few more questions here. Let's see. DRS chose to issue a paper refund on a Connecticut 1040 when the refiled return and direct deposit. Then it says, who do we call to find out if the bank account info was incorrect or that DRS chose to issue paper refunds to the bank, and that the bank account information was correct. So I guess they're trying to figure out, they had an e-filed return, and they're trying to figure out why it wasn't directly deposited, but a paper check was issued.
And we get this question a lot. I'll let Phil talk about this. There's a couple of different reasons why a paper check could have been mailed. We get this question a lot. Every time Phil and I are out talking, we always get this question: why did my client get a paper check? And I'll just say, before I turn it over to Phil, I'll just say, just in general, we go to great lengths to make sure that a refund gets into the right hands. And there's no better way to do that than a paper check. So Phil, I'll turn it over to you with that said.
You stole my thunder, John, without saying too much. The majority of them are based on rules in our system and evaluating things through verification to make sure that the money goes to the right person, like John said, because of everything that's been happening out there over the last 10 or 15 years with identities. Safest thing is if we know that's the person, but we don't know that's the bank account, because there's no way to verify the bank account, that it might end up going out as a check. But I think the best thing is, one of the best ways to submit questions, even if you are an individual filer and are filing through software, is to create a profile on MyConnect and go in there, and you could send web messages that'll go directly to our staff, can respond to them. So you would be able to see it, the responses right in there, or they can of course call our agency and get directed to somebody either in the appropriate area where we can see why it was flipped, and then advise the taxpayer.
And Phil, those web messages usually get answered pretty quickly, right? They go right to an individual. So if that's a good point to make here, if you are looking for information quickly, certainly use MyConnect and send us a web message. That's usually the quickest way to get an answer back.
Yeah, and you'd have to do it by being logged on. So it's not just a chat option. You create a profile based on your personal information. And once you do that, you'll be able to see all your information and correspond through web messages with us.
Yep.
Thank you. We have another question, which is, what happens to Connecticut loss carryovers under the pass-through entity tax when they elect out or switch from PTE to non-PTE back to PTE year to year? Good question. And these are some of the things that we're working on. So I don't have an answer right now for that. I apologize. I would have loved to have had that. But these are the things that we are talking about right now. So we hopefully will have something soon for you on that. Okay, great. We have another one. Taxpayer made duplicate payment of its sales tax confirmed in MyConnect, and DRS has not refunded the overpayment. Why? It's hard to say. We need to know more about that specific case. So again, I would ask, looks like Richard Kenyon, if you could contact us, we will certainly look into. And
Richard, if you are in MyConnect, like I had mentioned before about web messages, you can actually submit a web request or web message based on a specific tax type and a specific period and a specific topic. So you could actually select a message for sales tax for the period in question and a refund of the payment, and you could submit that message to us. We should be able to respond. And we don't always if payments come in that aren't associated with returns, we usually review them before we refund them to make sure that it's not for another tax type or for another period. So they might be being reviewed, but again, if you have a question and you are in MyConnect already, you can use the web messaging.
Are you finding that more and more people are becoming familiar with MyConnect and using it more often?
Business taxpayers, yes. We talk about electronic filing of personal income tax returns. The electronic filing is usually through software. So people really don't have a need to go in and use a portal to see it. They file the return electronically, they get their refund or they pay their bill. there's really not as much of a need to interact. But because the majority of our business tax returns are required to be filed electronically outside of the income tax returns with corp and partnership, which we have software for, every other return is available to be filed in MyConnect. Sales tax, withholding taxes, all the other business taxes. So people have to use MyConnect to file them. So MyConnect is being used for the filing. Preparers may be filing as a third-party preparer for businesses, but we'd always recommend that the business also creates their own profile so they can see what's happening on their account. But it is a large volume, again, because all sales tax filers have to file electronically. The only way to file is through MyConnect. So they should all, either them or the preparers, have an account.
Got it. It says need email contact info to present the amended returns refund allocation issue. Oh, so can you actually, I can do that. I can send everyone your email addresses. That's fine.
Okay.
I have both of yours, much to your dismay, I'm sure, but I will share that with the whole group.
No, perfect. That's
after the
fine.
meeting.
Yeah, perfect.
Just one other question. One of the things, we had a state tax group meeting recently, and some of the people were talking about their experiences in other states with new software systems. In particular, AI is being discussed constantly, and some software systems have it where it helps distribute the questions that, for example, may be posted in MyConnect. And I don't know if it has an AI component, but I'm curious. To the person right away. So you submit something and say it said sales tax, and somehow it's read as being a sales tax question. It gets immediately sent over to the sales tax people, and then they respond on it. And they said that most of the systems say that it'll take 24 to 48 hours before you hear a response, but they're actually finding that the responses are coming quicker with this new automatic deployment of questions. How does MyConnect work? I know that's been around it's not old, but it's been around before we were all talking about AI every day, but it seems like it is a good way for people to get their questions in and get responses. I'm just curious whether or not that does have one of those components, whether you find that that is helping and you don't feel you need to make any additional modifications, or whether you're looking at other opportunities that might work well for the department. I don't mean necessarily replacing MyConnect, but something else that could also help you in the near future. I asked this question because technology is constantly changing and the firms are constantly looking at new software. And I know we as a small nonprofit are as well. So I'd love to hear what you have to say on that area.
John, I guess I'll start and you should follow up. With MyConnect and software for tax processing, we use a software vendor to implement. It's not just the MyConnect, it's our entire tax processing system. The vendor that we've used to implement our system is in 32 other states, and it's a core product that we're using. So it creates similarities across other states. I know in the Northeast now, Massachusetts, Maine, Vermont, New Hampshire, all use the same software vendor, and it's distributed across the state. So usually we look as a whole about ways to improve on things. The MyConnect portal versus the Taxpayer Service Center, which is the old portal for taxpayers, it's a lot better because it's more connected to our processing system. It's not a separate standalone system. So when messages are submitted through there, we have staff that get those messages and are working them regularly. And on AI, again, that's something that's very difficult to get to, but our agency is looking at a new piece of our portal software that is more of a chatbot. It's not a live chatbot, but it's more of something similar to what you're talking about, Bonnie, with AI, but it's not real AI. We get questions and we try to display answers right away. And if we can't, it creates a list for our staff to look at what the questions are and to try to build more responsive answers. So if they type in a question, it'll either drive them in the right direction, or if you click, I think you've seen those before, that did not answer my question, right? And that'll create a list of questions that were asked so we can kind of make it smarter. But again, it's not AI, but it's building a database of questions and answers to try to get it there. We're working on that. We don't want to deploy it if it's limited. We want to get it as close as possible and then build off of it. But it's something that we may be seeing in the next few months on our portal. So you'll see it in My Connect, you'll see a little chat bot up there that you can ask questions to. But again, it's going to have to grow over time on
Right.
what types of questions are being answered or asked.
Thank you.
Yeah, and Bonnie, if I could just expand on it briefly, the whole concept of AI is something that every state agency is looking at, and there was a working group that was established between the Office of Policy Management and the legislature, and there was a real cautious approach being taken, and I can understand why. They want to roll AI out, you know, in a responsible and effective manner. The guidance literally just came out on this maybe a week or two ago from the working group. So agencies now have a roadmap to follow and assistance and guidance from OPM on how to roll out and how to utilize AI in a responsible manner. So we have that. We're in the real infancy stages of utilizing AI, but it's something that we look forward to engaging in.
That's great. Thank you. All right. We have another, oops, I just hit the wrong button, made the chat disappear. Give me 2 seconds. What is Connecticut's position on the MTC's revised PL 86-272 position that certain internet-based activities are nexus activities?
Should have known Tony would have asked something like that. No, only kidding. Thanks, Tony, for the question. We're very aware of it, and I believe California and New Jersey are the 2 states that kind of adopted. I'm not sure if there's been any additional states that have adopted the MTC's position on it, but Connecticut has not adopted the position. New York also. Thank you, Tony. I see. Yes, I do recall reading that New York also adopted it. Connecticut is not. We're aware of it, and we're kind of in the evaluation stages of that. I know it's been out there for a little bit, but it's not something that has really been at the forefront for us. To be honest, you know, Nexus comes up, you know, in audit activity, and we usually address it there. So it hasn't been a big issue for us.
Thank you. We are now at 9:58. I do not want to, I already do take advantage of the time that John's willing to give the society, but I did ask him to give us an hour of his time, and Phil was nice to join us as well. So I'd like to say thank you very much for taking the time to answer our questions, especially as tax season is really starting to truly get underway. I'd like to remind our members that we will send out Phil and John's email to everyone, so you've got that. And we do record this, and we will be posting it on the website, so that if for some reason you want to go back and review it for something that you just wanted clarification on and may have missed, do remember that that will be up in a couple of days. It takes us a couple of days to actually get that posted onto the website. But thank you very much for everyone for joining us today, especially Phil and John. I appreciate, again, your willingness to answer our questions. And thanks to our members. And if you have any additional ideas, this came about as requests from members. If you have another idea as to what you would like the next town hall to be, I know it's busy season for many of you, but we are doing these once a month throughout the year. Please send me that via email or text message to me, however you'd like to deliver it. I'd love to hear your ideas for future town hall meetings. Thank you, everyone, and have a great day.